Gideon and his many wives had 70 sons, but he also had one son with a concubine in Shechem, and he went by the name Abimelech. Now when Gideon died, Abimelech went to the elders of Shechem, and he said to them, "What would be better for you, to be ruled by the 70 sons, or to be ruled by one? And remember, I am blood of your blood, and flesh of your flesh." The elders discussed this among themselves, and they agreed it would be best to be ruled by Abimelech because he was their relative. And so they went to the city coffers, and they gathered up 70 pieces of silver, which they gave to him. And he used that to hire a band of thugs who would follow him. Abimelech and his men went to Gideon's home, and there, on one stone, they slaughtered all of his sons. Only Jotham escaped. Now, when Abimelech returned to Shechem, the people came outside the walls of the city, and they met him by a tree, and there they anointed him their king. When Jotham heard of this, he was deeply upset. And so he came and stood at the top of Mount Gerizim, and he called out, "Citizens of Shechem, listen to me, in order that God will listen to you." And then he told them this parable. He said, the trees decided that they wanted a king. And so they went to the olive tree and said, "You be our king." The olive tree said, "And give up my precious oils, which are treasured by people throughout the world? To do what? Hold sway over trees? No." So then they approached the fig tree and said, "You be our king." Oh, and the fig tree said, "Give up my fruits that are sweet and precious? To do what? Hold sway over trees? No." They approached the vine and said, "You could be our king." But the vine laughed at them and said, "Give up my wines, which are treasured by kings and commoners alike? To do what? Hold sway over trees? No." Finally, they approached the lowly thorn bush, and they said, "Would you be our king?" And the thorn bush said, "Yes, I will. And if you truly want me for your king, then lie here underneath my shade." Jotham continued. He said, "Today you anointed Abimelech your king. Do you think that has honored my father? Remember, my father risked his life to save you from the Midianites. Did you honor my father when you stood by and let him slaughter his sons? Did you honor my father when you stood by and you made the son of a slave girl your king? If you think you have truly honored my father, then may you find great joy in Abimelech and he in you. But if you know that you have treated my father with dishonor, then may fire shoot forth from Abimelech to destroy every one of you." And with that, Jotham turned and ran, for he greatly feared what Abimelech would do to him. Now the men of Shechem began going up into the hillside, and they would wait for the caravans to come by, and they would attack them and rob them of everything. This greatly hurt the coffers of Abimelech, because this was a profitable trade route, and many of the caravans began taking a different route because Abimelech could not promise them safety. Now one night, after a very successful raid, the men were all gathered in a banquet hall. They were eating heavy foods and drinking copiously. One man named Gaal, he stood up in the midst of them and he said, "Who is Abimelech that we should bow to him? Let me have my way with Abimelech. I'll get rid of him and I will be your leader." Now the governor was there, and he heard Gaal's threats. He left and went straight to Abimelech and told him about the overthrow that they were plotting. He advised Abimelech, "Take your men outside the city walls and hide in the hills. And in the morning, when the gates of the city open, swoop in and do what you will with these people." And Abimelech did. So when morning came, Gaal was standing by the city gates as they opened. And he looked out and he saw Abimelech and his men coming down the hills. He said, "Who are those? It looks like men approaching us." The governor was there and he said, "Oh no, you're simply confused. That's the sun casting shadows." Gaal continued to stare and finally he said, "No, that is a group of men coming to attack us." And the governor said, "Yes, it's Abimelech and his men." "Where are your big words now, Gaal? Go, fight him." And so Gaal did gather up his men, and they went to battle with Abimelech, but he was much too strong for Gaal. He slaughtered many of the men, and soon Gaal and the few that were left, they turned and ran away. And Abimelech went back into the hillsides with his men. Now the next morning, the people of Shechem thought that the battle was over and they would be safe. And so when the city gates were opened, they went outside the walls of the city and they worked in their fields. And Abimelech came down from 3 directions with his men and slaughtered the people of Shechem. He went inside the walls to continue the slaughter. A few people ran away to the tower. They went to the top, they boarded the doors and hoped that they would be safe from him. But Abimelech led his men up into the hillsides and he said, "Do as I do." And he began to chop down limbs and branches from the trees and loaded them on his shoulders. All of the men came down from the hillsides. They piled this wood around the tower and set it on fire, killing the last people of Shechem. And then Abimelech took salt and sprinkled it on the ground so that nothing would grow there. Now he planned to go to a neighboring village and also destroy them. Their guards saw Abimelech coming. They knew of his power and how evil he was. And so they gathered the people of their village and they all went to a fortified tower and barred the doors in hopes of being safe. But Abimelech again had his men bringing in the branches and the wood and they were piling it around the tower. But from up at the top of the tower, one woman looked down and she saw Abimelech beneath her. With every vestige of strength she had, she pushed a millstone and it came crashing down on Abimelech. He lay there on the ground knowing that he was dying. And he called to his sword bearer and he said, "Take my sword and run it through me and kill me, because I don't want to die being known as the king who was killed by a woman." And so the sword bearer ended Abimelech's life. And so it was that the prophecy of Jotham, that fire would shoot out from Abimelech, came true. But all the sons of Gideon were avenged.